the news version of the ZKProof community reference document. So quite a unique session today. And the people leading it will be, first of all, Daniel Benarroch. For those of you who still don't know him, I doubt if there are any, but I will give a short intro. Daniel is the lead cryptographer at Gadget. That's a company that's developing privacy enhancing technology. They're also a platinum sponsor. He obviously one of the organizers here. Before starting ZKProof, he graduated from the Weizmann Institute with a master's degree in applied mathematics and computer science under the guidance of Spekaers. Together with Daniel, we have today Luis Brandao.
That is.
Brandao. Sorry, my Portuguese is not the best today. He's a guest researcher with the cryptographic technology group at NIST. He is mostly engaged in privacy enhancing technologies, threshold cryptography, and circuit complexity projects. And last but not least, with them will be Eran Tromer. Eran is a research scientist at Columbia University. He's a professor of computer science at Tel Aviv University and a founding scientist at the Zcash cryptocurrency. He researches ZKProofs, side channels attacks, and other exciting topics in cryptography and system security. That's it. Without further ado, Daniel, Luis, and Eran, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. So as Yao explained, we're gonna today have a bit of a different first session. So we're gonna talk about the reference document and specifically we want to sort of aim to discuss what it would look like to advance to a version 1.0, right? Today we have a version 0.2. We're still somewhat far, but maybe not so far. For those that don't know, the ZKProof reference document is sort of an underlying piece of collaborative work that came out from the early on workshop of the ZKProof effort, and is in a collaborative effort also with NIST, specifically with Luis and his team. So first of all, I would like to sort of ask you all to really go, if you haven't done so already, and fill out this survey. It's going to help us, especially at the end of the discussion, at the end of the presentation, to go through your inputs. So it shouldn't take more than 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, depends on how invested you are in the survey. I shared it on the chat, so please do have a go. In general, the outline of the talk is sort of, we're gonna have a short story to illustrate the importance of the document. We hope you enjoy it. We're going to talk a little bit about the upbringing of the document, about the recent changes from the last version to the current one, the editorial process, how you can contribute to the document. We're going to talk about the survey results and then have a bit of an open discussion. The main goals of the presentation is to really present the ZKProof community reference and to motivate collaboration to improve it, right? As we were saying. Okay. So I hope you're all familiar with the story of Alice in Wonderland. Well, today we're going to talk about Alice in Zero Knowledge Wonderland, right? So once upon a time, disclaimer, right? All characters appearing in this short story are fictitious. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental, right? This is an important disclaimer in every single movie and short story. So once upon a time, there was a little girl called Alice. And Alice actually enjoyed very much reading books. She enjoyed reading all kinds of books and literature, from recipe books and cooking books, so that she could actually learn and have some guideline for her cooking skills. She enjoyed reading legal texts because she felt like it was a way of instilling a sense of a community and legal system. She also enjoyed reading tutorials and user manuals because it would help her learn a lot of new skills, right? And of course, she also liked to read a lot of fiction books, right? Sorry, I mean, this fiction book. So in all of this happened in a future world where essentially at this point, cryptography was the essence of every industry, right? As you can see here in this editorial of 2048, corporations actually went bankrupt because they did not prove in zero knowledge that they were solvent, right? And in this sense, Alice was very interested in cryptography. As she became older, she started getting interested specifically in zero knowledge. And she really wondered whether she would like to have her PhD in zero knowledge proofs, right? What happened is that her mentor at the university, at the Cryptography University of Florida, essentially gave her a bunch of papers. She told her, you need to start from the beginning and understand the fundamentals very well. And she got a lot of papers from the seminal work of GMR to a lot of theory that came from all these years that we've gone through, for non-interactive 4NP to physical zero knowledge proof systems like the Sudoku puzzle and UC security, and also the seminal work of Pinocchio that sort of broke one of the current barriers for practicality. But of course, Alice was wondering, if I have to read through all these papers and this is only sort of the first 20, 30 years of theory, and now we have 40 more years that I need to catch up with, she got really frustrated. So of course, she didn't know how to handle this, right? As any PhD student may know, or master student, research is difficult in itself, and having to catch up and onboard is also challenging. So all she really wanted, right? She started thinking, all she really wanted was essentially a document that would be sort of an educational tutorial to actually allow her to onboard the field. Some guidelines that would be agreed upon by an inclusive community, and a document that would be dynamic. That way she would ensure that it can be updated and then it's up to date, right, with the field. And so she went to Mr. Pepe, and Mr. Pepe actually gave her a tip. He told her, did you check out the ZKProof reference document, right? And Alice, to her surprise, she started looking at the reference document. This is version 16.3, so I guess we're still a long way, but we're already imagining how it would look like in 2048. And what Alice realized was that, this is the zero knowledge proofs for dummies, right? Now I can actually learn what zero knowledge proof is, right? But of course, don't miss out on the reference guide for experts. So what Alice actually realized is that this document would potentially be useful all along her career. So after her PhD, she went into the industry and started working with applications and trying to implement these schemes. And what she realized is that it was something like the Constitution of the United States, for example, where it served as a set of guidelines to instill usability, right? Not exactly like a legal system, but more, because we the people believe in zero knowledge. And even later on, when she came back to academia, in her sage times, she became a professor. And not only was she using the reference document as a way to mentor her students into the field, but also she felt like she could contribute and edit the reference document, right? That she could contribute just like you would to Wikipedia, for example, like experts go and create these entries. This is the story of how Alice in Zero Knowledge Wonderland managed to get through her professional career. This is a production of the ZKProof reference editors, and this is the end of the story. Now, of course, we saw that Alice was, in a bit more seriousness now, Alice was actually representing several roles of what we hope that the reference document would reach, right, with the kind of audience that it would reach. And if we can categorize them, these would be two different roles. One would be a consumer of the paper and the other one would be a contributor, right? We want to appeal to both of these audience types. So if you're a consumer, what we've thought of for now in some sense is that you can be a learner where you're onboarding in the field, you're using it for some applications, you want to start your research project and you want to get up to date. You could be a mentor or a professor or manager. So you can use it to suggest material with guidance to your students. Or you can be an evaluator where essentially you're receiving a piece of work, of zero knowledge work, and you want to check that the system is secure and actually conforms with the state of the art. Right? On the other hand, if you're a contributor, well, you may be an innovator and you want to integrate your research and your experience. Or you could be a sage and really want to convey the knowledge and sort of create recommendations and warnings for the generations to come. And now the question is really, who are you of these, right? And we want your input in this. So of course, all characters appearing in this work are fictitious and it's purely coincidental, but maybe not all that coincidental. So this is, at this point, we really encourage everyone, to, if you felt identified by the story, to sort of help us make this document what it can be. We know we are not exactly close yet, but we really have faith in this all over at ZKProof, right? So I want to, in case you still didn't actually fill in the survey, I am going to go through the survey with you. So we're actually going to take 2 to 3 minutes to go through the survey. So before we talk about the upbringing, let me place this here. So you can see the survey, right? And I encourage you all to open it with me. So please go ahead and open it. How many of you have opened the survey? There is around 70 participants. Okay, good. So I'm gonna read the questions and I hope you can answer with us. Eran, I think, is on the other side looking at how many answers he gets. So have you looked at the reference document before this day? So I will say yes. In what role do you use it? I would like to say a learner and an innovator. How important is it for you that the community reference will achieve each of the following, right? So here, I'll let you decide what's crucial, important, nice to have, or actually we don't really need it. So what about explaining zero knowledge and their properties? So I personally think it's crucial. And now I'm here sort of giving you all of my opinion. I think it's good that we're also transparent about this. Explain how zero knowledge proofs work in detail. So I think this is important. Explain what zero knowledge proof implementations and tooling exists. I also think this is important. Discuss specific zero knowledge applications. I actually think this is crucial because it serves to guide some of the motivations. Focus on intuition and readability, provide criteria for evaluation schemes, implementations, provide concrete recommendations. It's probably less crucial in my eyes because that's also why, in my eyes, we have the standards, but anybody can have their opinion. Also, I don't want to influence you by saying out loud my opinion, but focus on comprehensive, up-to-date discussion, and rigorous formalisms, definitions, and terminology. So I'm going to personally leave these empty for now, for myself at least, but please do sort of go ahead and fill it up. These are essentially, for us, a tip on what should be the next steps on the improved version of the reference document. And we would love to have you collaborate, so please do explain what you would like to help us collaborate in. And if you do and are interested, please leave us your email address, right? It's not required, but we would very much appreciate it. And yep, and if you want to share a little bit about what you like the best, then please go ahead and do it. So that's the reference document survey. So now let me go back to the presentation and sort of give you a couple more slides on the background of the reference document. So how did the reference document came into being? Well, it all started in the first workshop. The first workshop, we essentially had a 2-day workshop where we divided all day, both of the days into different tracks, the security, implementation, and application track. And the version 0.0 was established. That was actually a set of 3 different documents. As you can see, there were a lot of participants, and this was really an incredible piece of work. It's something like 80 pages came out of that. People took it really seriously. After that, the version 0.1 was essentially a compilation of these 3 documents into a LaTeX document. This was done by the NIST team specifically, the PEC NIST team. And after this, we actually had a way to sort of bring in other community contributors, or the same ones, but to have a cycle on contributions that led us to where we are today of the 0.2 version, right? This was published late last year. And what we want to say is really thank you. Thank you to all of those that participated, right? We have over 70 people that actually wrote in this reference document. So this is quite meaningful. I don't know off the top of my head of another document that is such an impressive collaboration. We also want to thank all of the participants that were at the discussions in the second ZKProof workshop, but didn't directly contribute. A lot of the ideas were based on those discussions, so that's also important. And I will now pass it on to Luis, who's going to talk to us about some recent changes. So let me get that 1 second.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, we have different presentations because of some technical issues, but I hope you can all cope with us on that.
Okay. Am I on the air?
Yes, go ahead, Luis.
Okay, great. Okay, so hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Daniel, for the introductory vision with this story from the future. Keeping in reference this story from the future, the goal of this part of the presentation is to look at what is the current state in terms of the most recent changes. And you might hear me a few times mentioning click because Daniel is making the clicks from the other side. So here's the front cover of version 0.2. In this short presentation, I'll go through a few selected highlights, namely mention a new chapter. So as Daniel mentioned, there were 3 documents in version 0. In version 0.2, now we have a new chapter. Then we'll go through some revised portions by topic. Then we'll take a few minutes to address, to highlight an aspect related to intellectual property, which is also something new in the new version. And then briefly mention some editorial improvements, and hopefully this will motivate the need of making a subsequent phase of changes towards version 1.0. But before getting into the part of the most recent changes, let's just pose a question. Why should we actually worry about refining the ZKProof community reference? So we already have a document, as Daniel mentioned, 80 pages from 2 years ago. Why should we be concerned about building a new document, namely considering that all this knowledge is already part of papers? Most people in the audience will know at least most of the basic stuff that is in the document. Well, and at least 2 points, maybe there are more. One of them is there is an inherent value in obtaining a result that comes out of a collaborative work with the community. That leads to a different kind of credibility and even referenceability compared with the different papers that maybe express a particular, just one point of view. And also what we're building here, which is actually going to be complemented with other documents like proposals and such, what we're building here with the community reference is a basis that can be a guide to seek further consensus and possibly even future standards in the future. Okay, now in order to achieve this vision, the community reference does need to evolve a little bit more, and that's why we have this part of the presentation. And in particular, I want to go through some of the things that we've gotten since version from 0.1 to 0.2. And this is based, what we got is based on suggestions that we got from review comments that we received. It's based on direct suggestions that were obtained throughout the second ZKProof workshop. And then following these suggestions, we had a process of contributions that also involved a number of people that produced those contributions. Okay, so topic number 1, paradigms, new chapter. So what we realized is that the first version of the document, which contains aspects of theory or security, aspects of implementation and applications, was and still is to some extent missing an intuition on how to actually achieve zero knowledge proofs for the person, for Alice, that that gets this document and does not have a prior knowledge on doing so. So we've started this new chapter, which basically uses as an introduction the taxonomy of constructions that already existed in the previous version of the document. And it's a nice introduction alluding to different types of zero knowledge proof approaches and how they can be kind of organized in a taxonomy. We have a new section called interactivity, because interactivity was an aspect that was not dealt in the first version and is an aspect that was mentioned throughout the second ZKProof workshop. But now what we have missing, well, what we have now is a big placeholder for description of various construction paradigms. So if you in particular in the audience feel that you know well about a particular paradigm and that you would be able to describe it in maybe 2 pages or so, that would be a nice contribution for version 0.3. Okay, next topic. Zero knowledge proofs of knowledge versus zero knowledge proofs of membership. So we're all used to hear this kind of one-liner about what a zero knowledge proof is. It's something that allows us to prove that a statement is truthful without revealing anything else. So for example, we may hear things like, okay, you can prove that you're an adult without revealing your birth date or your personal data, or maybe you can prove that you know how to reach a particular configuration in chessboard, or how to prove a theorem without revealing that particular knowledge. But in practice, there are two, I mean, across other variants with other subtleties, there are at least 2 main categories of zero knowledge proof statements, proofs of membership and proofs of knowledge. The second one, maybe the most common one in terms of explaining, is something where you have a witness and that's your secret knowledge, and that's the thing you want to keep secret, while you prove that some public instance X has some property related to your confidential information. And then there are proofs of membership, zero knowledge proofs of membership, where you just want to prove that some public element has a particular property, and maybe you can do so because you're all powerful or you have some kind of super computational ability. This distinction between these 2 types of proofs were not very clear in version 0.1. Version 0.2 does contain some clarifications, but we can mention that it's still really not enough. For example, we don't even have a game-based definition for proof of knowledge, whereas we actually have those for zero knowledge and for soundness, for example. Okay, another thing that is new in version 0.2 is that now the document does include recommendations about security parameters for benchmarking. For example, version 0.1 did not mention the aspect of potential statistical security parameters, typically useful for certain kinds of interactive protocols. Version 0.2 does mention statistical parameters alongside with computational ones. It does recommend that if benchmarks are to be done in order to compare different techniques, they should also be done at least for 2 different parameterizations, so that one can see what are the typical trade-offs of efficiency versus security. As in the previous topics, also here there are certain things that could make the document significantly better. So for example, it would be nice to have a few examples of concrete trade-offs. I mentioned here a graphic illustrating trade-offs because really currently the document it has a lot of words, but really not sufficient images. So adding a few images could probably improve the readability of the document. And also the case of concrete benchmark use cases would be something that we think would enable a better comparison of different techniques. Okay, one more topic in the reference document, this thing we call gadgets. So gadgets are essentially tools that can be used in a wide range of application use cases. And if you have it already defined, you can use it in a modular way to enable your application in an easy way. There was a nice table already on version 0 and 0.1, but it lacked a few elements. So some of those were completed in this new version. So now basically the tables are looking a little better. But here's one example of a possible improvement. So even in this table, you can see that in one column you have the gadget name, and then on another column you have some kind of intuitive description of what the gadget means. So For example, a commitment would be we're used to calling it the digital equivalent of a sealed envelope. So if we can actually make use of those analogies, so how about then actually devising a diagram that can explain the use cases that are currently in the reference document, but only with a lot of text and in some cases a lot of formulas. How about actually devising a diagram where you can actually see the envelope, and then maybe the envelope interacts with a lottery machine, or something else that are the analogies that we have here, basically to provide a quick, concise intuition about the application use case, and also to serve as a kind of sanity check for a person to look at the image and see if that matches with what the person is learning while reading the rest of the document. Okay, so now for a different topic, intellectual property. So, sorry. So this was already mentioned in some of the initial comments for version 0.1, and then it appeared actually as a contribution to version 0.2, an actual proposal of a text about with some proposed guidance on intellectual property. And the text that we currently have, which is in the reference document, is inspired on the NIST Information Technology Laboratory patent policy. So the goals of including some guidance, or at least mentioning the topic within ZKProof, one of the main goals is really to prevent abuse of the ZKProof process. So this is a community effort. People are getting together, presenting proposals, discussing ideas, trying to get down to the best guidance. It would not be nice if after all this is done and people accept something as being a very good recommendation, then later people would find that, oh, oops, this is actually protected in such a way that now everybody has to pay royalties to use it. So the idea of having an IP text is basically to set expectations that can make the ZKProof standardization process navigate in a good way. In particular, we want to promote wide availability of zero-knowledge proof technology. That's part of the ZKProof charter, and we want the tools to enable an easy collaboration among participants. So the main concepts in the text, which is in the next slide, and we're not going to read it because it's we don't have time for that. But the main concepts are here identified as four topics. One is that we want to have a strong encouragement for open source implementations. And then for the cases, because ZKProof is an inclusive endeavor, so we also don't, we allow different ways of promoting technologies. So in the cases where there is intellectual property, namely when there are patent claims, we strongly encourage disclosure of those patent claims. And in a particular case, we require it. And the particular case where we require it is when contributors are providing contributions to the reference document, or when they are basically making proposals to ZKProof for, let's say, for discussions in these workshops, then in those particular cases, they are required to disclose their IP. Then in the cases where there is IP, if those technologies are promoted in, let's say, the reference documents, such as guidance and things like that, then the licensing of that IP needs to satisfy certain conditions, such as being reasonable and non-discriminatory. And finally, this coming from the charter of ZKProof, the documentation that is published and shared should be editable and improvable, and that is achieved via a Creative Commons license. Okay, so here's the text. Let's not read it now. There are a few highlighted parts that relate to the bullet points I just mentioned. The only message that we would like to leave here is that we would be interested in knowing what you think about this intellectual property expectations. Okay, and finally about the changes that have been done so far. So all the changes have been annotated. So this is part of our commitment to transparency of this process as well. On the left side, you can see a little table with the topics of the contributions that were accepted for this version of the reference document. On the right side, you can see an example of a little table that contains a little summary of the proposed contributions and of the changes that were made. For example, on the right side column of that table, you can see an edit ID, which basically are little references that they are clickable. And once you click there, you go to the part of the document where those changes were made. And on the bottom side, you can see a rectangle where basically you see something that looks like a track changes document. So we do have a version of the community reference, which is a PDF that shows what has been deleted and what has been added. Okay, so this basically covers some of the notes we wanted to give about the recent changes. So now really the idea is that we have some motivation for the upcoming editorial process. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit now. So for the year 2020, starting today, we have envisioned 3 phases. The first one is obtaining review comments, like as kind of peer review comments. The second one is obtaining contributions based on those review comments. And then the third part is integrating those contributions so that we can get a version 0.3. And if we get a good advance this year, hopefully we'll be significantly closer to a version 1.0. And then next year we'll revise again the process that we need to do. Okay, so with respect to reviews, and we call it public reviews because we want all reviews that we get and all contributions that we get to be made public. What we would like ideally to have is that for each chapter, we have at least 3 reviewers. We would like to have reviewers in different roles or stages. So it would be nice to have at least 1 zero-knowledge proof expert per chapter, but we would also like to have possibly an initiating student in the area of zero-knowledge proof that can, for example, maybe provide us a glimpse of what are the things that are not clear for newcomers. It would also be nice to have somebody from the industry, but overall this is open to anyone. So please do let us know, contact us at editors@zkproof.org if you'd like to give a review of a chapter. The kinds of comments we're looking at that we would like to have, well, it's all kinds of comments, detailed and high level, even what we call annoying comments, in the sense that if you think there's something that would make the reference better, please do let us know. Just a quick editorial note, there is a version on GitHub called annotated changes version, which contains line numbers. So please use that one so that you can refer well to the parts in the text. Okay, a few more notes on possible review comments. So we're looking at things like, what is it that is not clear in the current text? Are there missing explanations or content? In particular, we do have some placeholders in the current document saying we should write here something about this topic, but we don't actually write something about it. In the part where there are actual technical claims made, is it technically accurate? Then we have several, there's an entire section devoted to use case applications. We could consider having more use cases, possibly even at the trade-off shrinking some of the current use cases. 2 bullet points that are here highlighted because they would also be things that would make the document significantly better, not necessarily at the expense of adding something about new content, but in terms of improving how the current content is presented. So one of them is we'd really like to have identified what are the places where it would be nice to have a concrete example, maybe even a toy example, to make the readability of the documents better. Another one relates to diagrams and illustrations. So again, as mentioned, basically the current document has a single diagram, and it could very clearly have various diagrams and illustrations that would enable kind of a checkpoint for the reader to realize, okay, does this match what I'm learning now, what I'm reading now? Here below, there's a table. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it's an example of several review comments produced by the NIST spec team, which mention some old comments that have not yet been addressed, as well as some new ones. Okay, once we get review comments, and hopefully we're hoping to get them by early July, then the editors will organize the received comments. We will publish them, and we will, based on that, we will organize a call for contributions. We will, related to that, we will also organize new GitHub issues. That's where we keep track of also some of the changes that are happening. Sorry, all of the changes. And then we hope to receive contributions per section. So while the review section is we intended it to be per chapter, while of course being open to any comment that anybody wants to make at any point, we would like the review contributions. We would like to allow people to basically focus on sections. Of course, they can focus on more than one section if they want, and then provide contributions for those. On the right side, you can see we have about 30 different sections. So there's really a lot to do, and basically consider that each of these sections is able to can be improved. This is one example of selected out of many possible ones, but I think this one is quite interesting. It can highlighting again the same aspect of visual intuition and basically making the community reference more pleasing to the eye. So on the left side, you can see a figure that I would guess that a lot of people will know what this figure means. So this is the story of the cave, in order to explain what a zero knowledge proof is to children, or at least without using any kind of mathematics. We can imagine, I mean, this is just a ballpark, of course, but we're mentioning here the ZKProof community reference is missing maybe about 20 figures or diagrams. So basically, if you feel that there is something in the reference document that you could actually describe using a diagram or even using an illustration, please do suggest that and or create that and submit it as a contribution. And then finally, once we get a number of contributions, hopefully around October-ish, then the editors will integrate the contributions into the main document, and hopefully either on December 31st or a little before, we will have version 0.3, which will basically be the representative version of 2020, which can then be submitted for further discussion in the next year. So thank you very much for your attention. This is what we wanted to highlight about this section. In the next section, there will be some open discussion. So I guess open-ended questions, let's leave it for that time. In the meantime, if you have quick clarifying questions, feel free to also pose them while Daniel changes this to Eran.
Yeah, maybe we can address some of the questions on the chat. At least maybe let's take 2 or 3 questions to cut a little bit the presentation mode and make it a bit more amenable. So I'm seeing here, Dara, I think is the first question.
Also, maybe it's a good time to ask for a note taker again, to make sure we have someone taking notes.
Okay. Yeah, you can volunteer on the chat as well. Thanks. Dara, you want to ask a question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah.
Oh, okay. So you have definitions for zero knowledge, soundness, things like that, but there are quite a few other definitions of more specialized properties in literature, like witness indistinguishability, honest verifier, or designated verifier, variants of things, witness extended emulation. Are those going to be included and also an explanation of their relevance and how they're used?
So I would say that these are good properties to have mentioned in the reference document, definitely. Some of these, like let's say witness indistinguishabilities, I would even classify it as, it kind of relates to this distinction we were promoting about knowing what is zero knowledge proof of knowledge versus a different kind of zero knowledge proof. Witness indistinguishability kind of fits within that kind of distinction that would be nice to have done.
Okay.
Thanks, Dara. Berzad, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. My question actually refers to the table about using Gadget And as far as I understood, you are mostly interested in the gadgets that use it to build ZKProof, ZK argument, or etc. So I wonder if a smooth projective hash function also can be counted in this category, as this is a tool that one can use. One can construct directly honest verifier ZK and also NIZK by the work by Abdullah and Ben Hamouda in 2015 and etc. So I mean the use of this SPHF stuff because.
So maybe I'll take this one just to say a few words in the sense that I think there is basically probably like an infinite amount of gadgets that we could include, especially as we sort of develop like the field and applications. I think this relates to two of the existing working groups in my eyes. One of them is the primitives working group, because I think we want to have sort of here, there's a good opportunity to have an overlap, right? Whatever the working group on primitives is focusing on, maybe that should be sort of the main focus of the reference document, at least to start with, right? I mean, I'm not saying we've removed stuff, but maybe we can go in more detail on the ones that we're working on that working group. And the second working group is actually the benchmarking working group, right? I think Luis mentioned that a few times as well throughout the talk that we would be happy to have in the reference document more details on benchmarking. And now it goes back to also the working group that we had, of the discussion we had last Thursday. So, if it's something that you find important and interesting and useful, then, by all means, go ahead and submit a contribution or a comment. We'd be happy to do it, right? Like the whole point is that at the end of the day, the community decides what goes into this document. So,
yeah, one complementary comment about gadgets is that, so in the current version of the document, at least, gadgets are motivated in the sense that, okay, here's a number of tools that are going to allow us an easier description of application use cases, how you can actually build an application once you already have these tools. So I would say that when proposing possible new gadgets, it would make a stronger case if a motivation is presented in terms of, look, with this gadget, you can simplify the description of use cases. So kind of maybe picking up on something that mentioned just in the previous section of the presentation, one of the things we would really like would be to have, let's say, a one-page diagram that explains an entire application as a complement to having, in some cases, maybe slightly as an alternative to some content, but instead of just having 10 pages that are describing an application in text and formulas, it would be nice to have a diagram. If a gadget, for example, is something that enables that explanation in a more natural way, then that seems to make a good case for it to be a gadget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bilsad. And maybe let's take the final question of Kostas and then move on to understanding the survey results that Eran has in surprise in store for us.
Yeah, my question is more practical of how volunteers, especially reviewers, will actually help. Because this one is not just a paper for a conference, right? It's a long-term process and you need reviewers there to be, I don't know, on specific periods that reviewing will happen, or it will happen live, like on every single edition, or when we accumulate, we collect enough information, then we start reviewing. How does this will work?
So I take that. So currently we're doing this kind of I mean, we only have two years so far, but we're doing it on a yearly basis. And on each year, we're defining several phases. On each phase, I mean, this is obviously a volunteering work, but I would say, at least in the current model, each phase, we're resetting the people want to contribute. So let's take this current year as an example. Right now, what we hope for is to have a revision, a kind of peer-reviewed, like if we were reviewing something for a conference or a journal, until early July. So if somebody is willing to commit to make a review until July, that's already a great contribution that we get. Contribution now in the sense of reviewing. and that can be closed there. So whoever does that, we're not even asking necessarily, but of course people are welcome. We're not even asking that whoever submits the review needs to be the one to then make the contribution. So if you just want to do a review, that's already great. Now, regardless of whether you did a review or not, once we get to the point where we put out a call for contributions, this will also have a delimited period. It will be from somewhere in July until somewhere in October. Okay, then we might kind of extend a little bit or not. That's at least what happened last year. So it's not so much hard deadlines, but it is limited in time. So it's not an ad eternum thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah, just to say, just a small comment that, we also have sort of limited resources as a community in ZKProof, and we don't want to sort of overuse the community, right? We have the reviewing of the proposals, we have the authors submitting proposals, that's on sort of the one side, right? Then we have the reference document, the contributors, we have the steering committee. So there is a lot of roles that sort of come up in ZKProof, and we try to minimize the amount of commitment that people should be or must be given, right? So yes, that's also something we're happy to hear from you. Okay, so I'm gonna put now, let Eran talk. So Eran, do you want me to update once more the slides?
Yes, can you project the latest version?
Yes, absolutely. Let me just make sure that I have the latest version. Okay.
Right. So in order to make sure that we are calibrated to the community and prioritizing and giving the right focus, and as well as a means to garner support and contributions, we have run the survey that you just participated in. And actually, I've been spending the last half hour rapidly and repeatedly updating our summary of the survey as, by now 37 of you have contributed fairly verbose input. So thank you all, and it's not too late. We will be looking at the latest answers and aggregating them. But let me give you a snapshot of where we are right now. And the purpose here is to calibrate you as well, but also to encourage discussion. As I go through the questions, feel free to add your own answers or observations. And any remaining time we have in this session, we can discuss these or additional big picture questions. So we had 37 correspondents as of this second, meaning these slides are only slightly out of date. That includes a person who participated twice, giving widely inconsistent answers, but using the same email address. I will respect their multiple personality disorder and include them in both votes. The good news is that we actually have more than half of the participants who at least skimmed the document, and a significant fraction who also read a large portion. We also see from other subsequent comments that many are or intend to read it, so this will rapidly improve. Now, what roles do they assume? Daniel went through these roles earlier. The majority are perceiving themselves as learner from the documents, 66%. A quarter also intends to serve as mentors by suggesting the documents to others so they can catch up. We have slightly misaligned slide because the bottommost part is other. I apologize for that. We have just a sixth who could perceive themselves as sage, bestowing knowledge, but actually I think many more in this community could serve in that role. So thank you for your humility. And 43% perceive themselves as having specific contributions that they made that they would like to make sure are incorporated, which is perfectly legit, right? This the same drive that made you do the research because it is important should drive you to also make sure that others are aware of it. And a sixth also are going to use the documents to evaluate systems, which is great because this is at the end of the day, a big part of what standardization is for. Next slide. Now, which parts are important? This is a lot to digest. Let me just give the highlight that everyone agrees that it's crucial to explain the basics of what are zero knowledge proofs and their properties. There is consensus on the need for intuition and readability, which I think is something that we definitely can use more attention on. There is no consensus on how deeply we should discuss specific applications. Some actually prefer there not to be much discussion of specific applications, and this also shows in the later open-ended questions. On all other questions, there is a general fuzzy consensus that yes, we should do that. Now, here's the most fascinating part. What topics should be improved? So this is our call to action. And everything you see here that you think you can contribute to, please do. Please reach out. Please participate in the process. And let's check off some of these marks. Several people ask for more discussion of various schemes, mainly the latest crop going beyond the QAP-based schemes. This includes schemes based on polynomial commitments, like the ones discussed, for example, in Ariel Gabizon's talk a couple of weeks ago. This came up in 2 of the comments, so clearly is a hot topic. There's a suggestion to integrate the discussion of MPC and in particular its interaction with ZKP. There's a request to have more details about the specific constructions of zero knowledge schemes that currently we mostly punt on, as well as post-quantum lattice-based snarks and snarks. There is a request, the same slide, there's a request for additional references, for additional survey of implementations, and standards for all levels of implementation, something that we will definitely dwell on an hour from now. And a couple of requests to have more discussion of gadgets, to have more formal treatments, as well as interoperability standards. Interoperability standards, again, pertinent to our upcoming discussion of ZK interface. Next slide. We saw in previous discussions the matter of zero knowledge friendly primitives, whether they are part of the constraint system or are adjacent to it, as in accumulate and prove and commit and prove. That came up. Again, the matter of composability needing more attention, various introductory material that could be added, as well as the more discussion of applications that's been requested. So a lot to do, and I know that you there looking at this can contribute to several of these. So let's see what people have already contributed, volunteered to contribute. So a couple of contributions suggested to expand the discussion of structured reference string and trusted setups and how to do those. There is a rudimentary discussion, can definitely use more attention. If you are one of those 2, reach out to me so I can put you together to coordinate. More discussion of application requested multiple times. Thank you for the person who suggested the MPC addition and also to write it. Likewise for the post-quantum snarks, and as well as the PL and ZKP. Those have already volunteered to cover that part. And then there are high-level issues of communication, general review, and we can definitely use some fresh eyeballs on this forum about making things accessible and made well integrated. Next slide. Do people know what to do? Okay, this slide came out funny because of revision. Sorry for that, but yes, the majority know what to do. That's good news. Yeah, I'm sure everybody knows by now in order to contribute.
Wait, I'm reading the opposite, that most people don't know what to do. And then we should actually try to put more effort in getting that knowledge out there.
Oh my God, yes. Unfortunately, you are right. I was summarizing according to a much older version of this slide, and I didn't bother rereading the color chart. So I hope that the preceding lengthy discussion let you know what to do. But if you still don't know, then the short version is email us at editors@zkproof.org, and we'll take it from there. don't let any technicalities get in the way of writing good content. Which parts did you like best? Yes, this is a good slide. So people like the constructions paradigm section. So thank you, Yuval and the team who led that one. People like the discussions of transferable proofs. Someone liked everything. Others like the use cases, the security discussions, the gadget discussions, and the general structure. So this is nice, warm, fuzzy feeling after all the things that we know can be improved. There are also many additional comments. My favorite one is that very last one in bold. I regret not doing more up to now, but I am motivated to contribute. Music to my ears.
Amazing.
Yes. We will share these updated slides within the discussion comments on the forum. We'll see about the format. And actually, as I was racing to meet our time constraints, I forgot to pause to ask for additional input. So let's just open the stage now for any and all questions.
Yeah, I think we have a couple, like a time for a couple of minutes, so for a couple of questions or discussion points. Does anybody want to raise any points, any more questions from the talks, or maybe the results of the survey? Or would like to volunteer in public to help us improve this document? Okay.
But I have one question.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for like including the discussions that were at this workshop, for example, about the proposals? Is there a plan to include them in this document, or is it a separate document?
Eran, you want to take it?
So we have an option of integrating content into the document. This is appropriate, especially for shorter portions of text. The alternative is to keep the proposals, both the SOKs and the standard proposals, as separate documents, but refer to them from the community reference, and even provide a short summary, basically their abstract, within the community reference to make it stand by itself and not overburden it with the details. That would also make the editorial process for these auxiliary documents much more lightweight. It won't have to go through the iterations over the main document. It's a judgment call that every working group that we've established we need to make in coordination with the ZKProof editorial team.
Thank you, Dario, for the question. Anyone else have more questions? Okay, I think I have one last question for all of you, given that we have like 2 more minutes. So I want to do one last sort of a big poll or survey. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm going to ask you all basically to raise your hand, but in Zoom, right? So you know there is the little feature of raise your hand. If you will actually use the reference document in any role that we've outlined or that you could find useful for yourself. So please go ahead and you have 1 minute to raise your hand. Beautiful. We see it, fill it up. If you don't raise your hand, we'll take it as you're not interested. So make sure to raise your hand if you're interested.
So I'm going to publicly apologize because I can't find the button.
So it should be in the, I think it's in the participants tab. Okay. this is important for us because this really gives us the motivation to continue working on this. You know, I really want to thank Luis and Eran for all the work that they've put. You know, you couldn't imagine, maybe you can, but you know, it's been a lot of work this past year. You know, it started, I guess, last year when we were at Berkeley, really, you know, until very late working on this stuff, and it didn't stop throughout the year. So thank you all. This is great. I think we got, you know, more than 2/3 of the people raising their hands. So that's very a very good indication for us. So we've gotten to the end of the session. So I'm going to stop recording now. So first stop share, stop recording.